This is Jim. I'm in my early 60s. I am a married father of 3 grown-up children, and I own my own small business. And I come from a town just south of Boston. I've been suffering from chronic arthritis for years, and I've gone to everybody and have tried everything across the board. She's aware of the fact that I'm kind of looking to replicate a relationship I had a few years ago with a great yoga teacher who did things that I couldn't explain, but, through a combination of her personality and the connections that she made and a very, I guess you would call it, a customized regimen she came up from my limited physical capabilities. Mm-hmm. No hot yoga for me, I found that I felt better. And, my wife and I had shared this over the years. She understood it. There was never really any kind of question about whether or not it was something that was going to fall outside of the boundaries or anything like that. So, yeah, in this particular case, we're very open about it, and she understands why I go and what I'm looking for. It kind of starts with the fact that, I've had a lot of therapies and treatments over the years, and frankly, a lot of them become very impersonal. If you're in an infusion chair and you're sitting around for 6 hours, you feel isolated. And in a way, you become, I'm not going to say desperate, but you recognize you need some kind of connection with a very important part of your life. Mm-hmm. And so it's because I had this a few years ago that I was in search of it. And I really kind of understood that it really took a specific person. And I stumbled on Cuddlist quite accidentally. I didn't give it much thought until I read about it and worked my way through the profiles to get a sense that, wow, this might work. So I really didn't think in terms of the specific things. I thought in terms of getting to know and getting to meet someone who could connect you on a deep level. And I had such a kind of a limited amount of, physical reaction would be a way to describe it. I kind of get pretty bound up with my condition here. So anybody that can just kind of connect and take some of that tension away and make you feel that the time you spend is well invested was worth the experiment. So I contacted Danielle, who happens to be my professional cuddlist, and she's in and around my area, and there was something about the vibe she sent across the internet, something about the follow-up conversation that we had, and something that continued through our first meeting. And I knew this was kind of a special person. She thought differently from other people. She wasn't looking specifically to say, let's hug, let's lay down, let's stand up. She said, let's find some comfort. Let's see if we can't connect to the things that are going to make you feel better. And just her demeanor and her whole presentation, within seconds, you feel comfortable, you feel relaxed. Mm. And then an hour flows by, and I'm not even sure I can describe it, but simple little touches. You hold your hand out, and she puts her hand on the top just to see if she can pick up some kind of vibe about who you are and what you're about. Whether she can or not seems irrelevant to me. What's most important is she's attempting to do that. And you feel it. You sense that this is a person that's interested specifically in you and your well-being for the course of your session. And that's maybe the most incredible thing about it, because you know that they are bringing this incredible intention to it. These are kind of special people, and I think that they put themselves out there. And they know that they could be subject to scrutiny and to criticism, but yet they do it with the intention of making someone else feel a little more special or a little more whole. And more than anything, I felt that than any specific benefit for, well, let me give you an example. At one point, she says, let's lie with our backs up against one another and see if we can't get into a breathing kind of rhythm. And you do that, and 15 minutes go by, and you say nothing, and all of a sudden you notice that you're the way you would feel before you fell asleep, calm and relaxed. And I had no idea of which direction we were heading in, except that when we got there, I felt better. And I felt better being in her presence, and I felt better in the car on the way home. And when I talked to my family, they noticed I looked and sounded a little bit better, and I said, I feel a little bit better. And that drove me back. And I can honestly say that with each session, you feel a little bit calmer, more composed, a little less stressy. I mean, I'm not sure I can really deal with, catastrophic illnesses or pains, but it does a lot for your psyche. It does a lot for the way you feel about the world and the people in it. It's a hard thing to describe, but it's very tangible.
And how long have you been doing it?
January. Yeah, and it's not something where you feel this immediate thing. You just feel a sense of everything changing, all for good reasons. You feel that you're in the presence of somebody that's calm and looks at the world differently and allows you to do that. You feel like it's one of the best hours or two, depending on what you schedule, that you've invested in weeks. It makes you feel better about when you get home, and I feel a little more kindly disposed towards the things that my wife needs, but I wouldn't have thought about before I saw Danielle. They have very basic creed connected to this idea of asking, responding, giving, taking, all with this idea that mutual consent is critical, and it kind of forces you to respect all that stuff in a way that I think, at least in my case, I've forgotten. It's some very good and basic human things that they bring you back to, and it's hard to ignore. You can't walk out and not feel a little bit different being around people like that. They glow a little bit. That might be the way to describe it. And I say they because my experience with Danielle is the one I have on a limited basis, meaning I see her. But I've had written exchanges with other therapists, and I've had conversations with other therapists, and they give off the same thing. So I don't know where they grow them, but we should be lucky, because I really think that they're out there doing something that needs to be done. And, I'll give you another thing, and if this is helpful. The ideas that these sessions conjure up are things like I remembered holding my daughter when she was 2 years old, or I remembered a hug from my sibling when things were a little bit shaky, or the hand on my father's shoulder when I was younger. And then, he died only a few years ago, and he was with us when he went. My hand on his head, I could not explain why these images kept popping into my head. It's because I've had a lot of, invasive and active kind of therapies over the years, but these things were so much more powerful because they connected to me in a way that I hadn't remembered in years. And it's so hard to explain, but in a way they're committed to connecting with you, period. In any way that makes sense, that falls within the context of how they set this up. And it's all about respect and, acknowledging that we're different people, but we're here for the same thing, which is to connect. I might be on the fringe of people that have reacted to this like this, but it's been an incredibly impressive experience for me.
I keep hearing the word connection and the word consent over and over again, which I think are both really, it seems like really unique to this kind of therapy, because with any kind of like physical therapy, there's a wall up where you don't really, you don't connect on like an emotional or spiritual level with your physical therapist, probably.
Right.
And with like a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a therapist in that sense, you don't really connect with them on a physical level, but also there is like this boundary of professionalism that often keeps them from connecting with you.
Absolutely.
In a real way too.
And I noticed this, that over the years, it's not really important how old you are, but experience kind of shapes you and helps you build layers of protection around you from the emotional or psychological things that wound us all, that make us wary. And so when someone kind of breaks through that and connects to something that you probably haven't really felt since you were a toddler, or at least approached in the same way that you did as a toddler, it's shocking. And you start to realize that these things are still with us, and we are the architects of our own kind of isolation. And these simple little things that break through, I mean, it's intention, it's thoughtfulness, and it's response. And that's why consent to me, as you just mentioned, is so important, because it's such a powerful concept. It's so loaded with respect. We're going to make sure that no one is being force-fed a treatment or, being coerced mentally or physically. This is really a whole different vibe. It's beyond my experience, to be honest, except in patches of memory,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What has your reaction been, or people's reactions, friends and family, as you've been, sharing with them your experiences?
Well, they chuckle at Cuddlist
Yeah.
because they recognize that it means two things to them right off the bat. The first thing is it's like, oh, and you kind of think of puppies and children. The other thing is, oh. So it walks that line of having, kind of connotations that don't even remotely speak to the power of this, and I don't want to even be remotely critical, by the way, of the name. It's just that I find it hard to communicate all that I get from it, and without trying to have to explain cuddling. Cuddling really speaks to what they do in a general way. What happens is you have these, as I said, these wonderfully gifted, kind people that are putting themselves out there to make connections with other people. And this great network that facilitates that, I don't even know how they begin to explain what happens, but that's the same reaction I get with people. Their first reaction is kind of like a little giggly. And then when you talk about it, they go, wow. And I don't know. At first I thought you could say, here, let me hold your hand, and you'll get it. But that's not what it's about. It's not a physical thing. It's the intention of the person who's there in the room. And the way they make you feel. They know what they're doing. They know that there is science to support all these chemical reactions that, create wellness. They know that people of different, I think about veterans and senior citizens and people with physical and psychological issues and people that, frankly, have just been kind of like shoved into the corner of life. They would react so wonderfully to this. It's connections, and it seems to me that after talking to them, you realize that sex is just purely and simply not the goal. It really has nothing or should have nothing to do with it. It's about all those other marvelous things that come from human connection.
Right. Were this evolved with this mindset before going to a professional cuddlist?
I might have been. I've spent a lot of time looking into things. I've been involved with meditation and mindfulness and things like that over the years. I've been a recovering alcoholic for 25 years. So, I've gone on a lot of different searches for better things, and whenever I've applied myself to making something better by investing, I've gotten back. But this is the first time I've experienced this, and I'll be honest with you, if someone told me that I might feel this way before I went, I don't think I would have believed it. But lately, this has kind of pushed me off in other directions, like looking into things like some of the neuroscience behind it or how we think and behave. And it's been really a very enlightening thing for me. And it doesn't create conflict for things like religion or family life. None of those things have to be compromised in order to pursue this kind of thing. These are like, I'm not sure that I can give it as much as I can get it. I really feel her, and in some regard, she feels me. Now, I've taken that for granted for years with my wife, that we, of course, feel that way. But I don't think I've tried to communicate that to her in a long time. So I don't know whether or not I have the skill to deliver what I'm getting through Danielle. And I hope I do. I want to definitely do that as much as I can, but I'm not sure that they're very nice. They say we're in an exchange, but you really know that you're the beneficiary.
Yeah.
And I hope to be. I'll be honest, I can't imagine anything better. It's not something that takes over your life, but it's an element that once put back in your life makes a big difference, I think.
So I've never gotten a massage before, and it's because I feel like I'm very physically affectionate with my friends and my family, but I'm pretty introverted, and there is definitely a hurdle for me to overcome with being comfortable being touched by someone who's a stranger. And it's the same reason I've never gotten a massage is because that idea just makes me so uncomfortable.
Well, and I know a lot of people that feel exactly that way. And, that's important that you said that, because it's the fact that it's coming from a stranger that makes it so incredible. It kind of makes you feel a little bit hopeful that if you can connect that way with people that you haven't invested years in developing a relationship or a romance or a friendship, that if we can just figure out a shortcut to having a less caustic interaction with people, how much nicer it would be. I just feel, another quick example, and I won't bring it up again, but I drove home after the first session, and usually, like a good road rage, I'm game. I could go with that. And I was born and raised in New York, and I lived in New York City until I was in my 30s, right? So I know how that works. But at some point, someone cut me off, and my first reaction was to kind of pull up next to them and glare, and I just put my hands up and just drove past. I had no desire to confront at the moment. I don't know why.
They disarmed you.
Yeah, kind of. It's nice to be disarmed, though. I was I worked in technology for a number of years, and I think one of the biggest problems we face is the lack of connectivity. It's gone from lack of physical connectivity to eye contact to communication. I watched my children, I have 3 of them, at one point sit in the same living room, text each other.
No.
Okay? Yeah. And that's not that foreign. And now they're all in their 20s, but still, that idea is not far from the truth. And another thing I didn't mention before, that I started reading this incredible author. His name is Steven Pinker. He's a psychologist from Harvard, and he's developed a lot of scholarly work on the subject of, are we violent people anymore? Have we changed? And you read the stuff, and it's astonishing to see how far we've come. And we are so much better, and we are getting better. And when things like this come out, it makes you feel even better about the future, because we've gone from, less global violence to less local violence. And then hopefully we're going to get to a lot less personal violence. And then this might be one of the ways we get there. It's an incredibly hopeful thing. Maybe that's it more than anything. It might be something that we've since forgotten, because I know, and I'm no anthropologist, but I know way back, these were, whole messaging systems that were used very effectively when people couldn't speak as well or read or write or use TV or electronics. They had to rely on these things to communicate things. And our bodies were so incredibly sensitive. I read the scientific literature. It was a shock to me that the human skin is the most sensitive, receptive, and communicative organ that we have. I would have bet it was the eyes or, the body. And so you don't think about that until all of a sudden you feel it. And again, I think it's less about the actual touch. There was nothing I can remember after 4 sessions with Danielle that said, and it was the way she rubbed my neck. That's not it. It's all about being in her presence and knowing that she's opened herself and is opening me to have, a real exchange. I don't think we've had any terribly serious conversations or anything that's more than musings, but I feel better. And it's just the basics. Search your memories and your experiences for things that are so satisfying emotionally and physically. They lift you. And they're usually in the, in the vernacular of things like hugs or moments or, a touch at a critical moment when you desperately need it. The knowledge that another person is there with you and for you. You'll say those are the best things that ever happened, right? You won't remember, the 15 years you spent in radio or selling advertising. That stuff goes away. And what remains are like, wow, I had so many really great moments. I wonder where they all went. This is a connection back to some of those. And not only the ones hopefully you have just with the Cuddlist, but maybe these Cuddlists are kind of preparing us to be a little bit better at this once we go out into the world, right?